You are listening to the We Need to Talk Old Tasker podcast, and this is our spoiler-filled conversation with Drew Daniels, director of photography of Anora, now in cinemas.
I mean, Anora for me is like exactly my kind of film. It's the kind of films I like to shoot. It's how I like my movies to look and feel. Literally every day, I had to be the person to be like, to pull the plug and be like, guys, we can't shoot anymore. I'm 2 stops underexposed. I'm already pushing everything a stop just to get a consistency within the image across the day. I knew I was going to have to push in the morning and push in the evening, so I just pushed everything. I kind of just walked down the hallway, like as the tracking shot happens in the film, and I was like, dude, I think this hallway is the perfect dimension to fit the camera to track laterally, lap dance to lap dance to lap dance to lap dance.
First of all, Drew, it's so nice to meet you. Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, no problem. I'm excited to talk about the film. I really love the film, so easy.
But before we get into the film, we usually like to kick off our episodes by asking our guests about not just why or how they got into filmmaking, but about those early memories as well, when they first fell in love with films. So Drew, what's the origin of your love for the medium and the story behind it?
Well, I'd say the original way that I fell in love with cameras and cinematography and shooting was through skateboarding. So I have to say, I'm not one of those people that, picked up an 8mm camera when they were 12 years old or 10 years old and started shooting movies and editing them and, writing films with your friends and stuff like that. Like, that's not me at all. I didn't even know what a director or a cinematographer really was, I'd say, until I was in college. So the way I got into it was through skateboarding. We filmed our entire lives. We did make some skits and, we were probably more inspired by like Spike Jonze and Jackass and stuff like that. I'm kind of from that generation, but we just always had cameras. We always filmed everything. I was filming skate videos. I was editing skate videos literally every single day, obsessively. That was my life for all of high school and some of middle school and even into college, and then that transitioned. And I always did have a love for films. I remember going to my grandma's house and watching like spaghetti westerns and Forrest Gump obsessively. Of course, I thought Clint Eastwood was directing the spaghetti westerns. I thought the actors were doing everything. I was very naive. And then I think in college, I watched Pulp Fiction, and that one really kind of sparked just like a curiosity in cinema because, it was very obviously a Quentin Tarantino film, and there was something very different about it. There was a craft, and the craft was noticeable. It wasn't Forrest Gump, where it's like this sort of perfect invisible filmmaking that just feels so right. It was like bold choices and strange editing and cool music. And so that really like sparked my interest, and I had to study something. So I decided to study film because I knew how to use a camera and I knew how to shoot 35mm film and whatnot, and understood exposure and this and that. And so, yeah, that just got me. As soon as I took my first film class, I knew that was what I wanted to do. And as soon as I got on the set, I knew that I wanted to be a cinematographer because I just watched the cinematographer and just fell in love with that position and how they aided in the storytelling and how they knew their craft and how they were able to like shape the visuals and tell a story. And also just the family aspect of it, of filmmaking, was something that really, really attracted me. And it felt like this misfit group of like carnies or something, all doing their own, all having their own little crazy family life on set. And the goal of the film kind of bonded everybody in this really beautiful way. Everybody had the same mission. So I even try to do that on these films now, like especially Anora was like, got to cast your crew in a way. You have to cast them. You have to make sure that they're the right people to go on that crazy journey with, and for them to be part of your family for months, and to go through the trenches with them, and to be stuffed into moving vehicles while you're shooting, and uncomfortable situations, stressful situations, all that, So I feel like from those early films, getting on like grad student films in college, I would crew up for those films and just, I was a grip, or I was a second AC or whatever. I just learned early on, can't take it too personally when people get upset or when people are, short with you or whatever. It's all in service of the film. Everyone's trying to just work quickly and work towards that same goal.
Love that. As for Anora, it's your second feature collab with Sean Baker after Red Rocket. So from Texas City, Texas to Brooklyn, New York, from Mikey to Anora, from Simon to Mikey. And there are so many talks about the questions raised, the topics covered, and whether or how much Sean is in general throughout his filmography fixated on certain segments of society. But that's his journey, and today we are of course covering yours, and these two films have been the two occasions where it's your journey as well. And I'm not gonna ask you to compare these two or anything, but taking a step back as much as one can do when talking about his own life and work, how would you like to reflect and look on these two films and what might come after?
I mean, I think ultimately when I'm making films, especially with Sean, like I just want to make a really good film, and I want to make a film that feels like my film as much as Sean's film, and I think that's the thing I love about Sean is we see things so similarly. We have similar taste in editing, which I think is very important. And we actually talk about the edit while we're on set all day. Sometimes, we're talking about, we don't really shot list terribly much. I mean, I feel like we show up and we kind of figure it out. And then we don't even really do very many blocking rehearsals, I got to say, because Sean wants to keep the experience very fresh, for the actors when we're making it. So we might go through like some of the movements, but we never actually do the full thing. But I got to say, like Sean's films are Sean's films, like we don't even really talk a whole lot about like the meanings behind the film so much. I'd say like we see things very similarly. He has his reasons for making his films, for his films about sex workers in particular. Like I was more interested in like, what are the themes and like, what is the main dynamic in the film we want to explore? And in this case, it was power, It took me like a week to get it out of him, But as soon as he said, oh, it's power, I think he almost didn't want to let me know in a certain way. Like he wanted to keep it like a little bit of a mystery, but whenever he said that, it kind of like a light bulb went off, like whenever I work with any director, I'm trying to find these concepts to be able to sink my teeth into and latch onto, and then I can explore. And I honestly, sometimes the less, the better. If it's like one concept or two concepts, then it's much easier. I could like throw some ideas at that and wrap my head around it, as opposed to some really big complex idea. Anyway, so power was a constant in the film. And I feel like, from the beginning to the end, you see how she uses her power and what her power is. And it kind of comes full circle. And there's a lot to unpack with that. I'm not really going to go into that, but I don't know. Yeah, I think I have my taste. Sean has his taste, and like somehow they like really aligned really beautifully on both of the films we've made, where the films have a lot of character and a lot of personality. The location is always very important to us. I mean, we try to make you feel like you're there, especially I feel like in Red Rocket. I mean, that place was incredible and so much texture and personality, and we wanted to include the smokestacks from the refineries in every single frame. I would be moving the camera 1 inch this way, 1 inch up, back to this way, just to frame a smokestack through like a window, through in the deep, deep background, like things like that. So yeah, we just have a certain like lust for cinema, and making films is very exciting for us. And I think especially when you find someone that you can really collaborate well with, I think we like to push each other and just have fun with it. I'm not even sure if I answered your question.
I'm not even sure it's a question that can be answered. So, by the way, had you had the chance to read the script of Anora before casting took place? And how does your visualization, and in this case, how did your visualization of the script change after you learned about who were going to play certain roles?
Well, I actually knew Mikey was going to play Anora the very first time I read the script. So I could already imagine her in it. So, we did camera tests in LA months and months before shooting. So with Mikey, because she was already like attached, which was awesome. I mean, to get your
It's
main
incredible.
character in like, even in some of the similar wardrobe, we always knew it was going to be a red scarf. So I had camera tests with her wearing a black jacket, a red scarf, and shooting, on a rainy day in LA. And it was perfect. It was like the camera test honestly informed the look of the film to a T, the very first one. And actually something happened on that day that was really cool. We were shooting with that crazy zoom lens, this anamorphic zoom lens that we had, this Lomo, which was like, it's ancient. The images has a green cast to it, super milky image. I mean, this thing is, Soviet lens from the 70s, has a leather bellows on the front. I mean, and a huge front element. So like, this lens is really special. And we were testing it. I was like, oh, this is the look of the movie. And then what happened was it got really dark that day during a take, and I didn't compensate the exposure. And as it started to get darker and darker, and I accidentally shot the image a couple stops underexposed. And then when we watched the footage with our colorist and we're coming up with the look, we found that shot, and he brought it back up, and it had really muddy shadows and was really a little grainy. And it was the movie, like that particular image that was underexposed on accident and brought back up. And with that crazy lens, it just felt like, okay, this is it. We know what the movie is now. We know what the look is for much of the film, at least. So I always knew it was going to be Mikey, and that was that. But the big surprise for me was the other characters. I mean, okay, so I also knew Karin was going to be Toros because Sean has always worked with Karin. So, I mean, that's a big chunk of the film right there. And I mean, he from the beginning had ideas about casting. Like he knew he wanted Yura. So I knew a lot of the faces he wanted, but the big surprise, I got to say, was Mark playing Ivan. Like that character and what he brought to the role was so special. I mean, so likable. Like in retrospect, I cannot imagine any other actor playing that role.
I mean, that's the find of the century. I mean, literally, like crazy.
Yeah, this kid just has endless charisma. He's so funny. You could take any scene, any line, and make it something. Any line that's just like a throwaway or anything. Like he gave it so much character. And then, which the film hinges on, like you have to be able to fall in love with this guy or it doesn't really work, and the crazy part was, so Mark and Yura's, they both came from Russia, like straight from Moscow. And of course, this is, during the beginning of the war in Ukraine. It's hard to bring Russian people into the country. I mean, and then of course, certain executive people were really against bringing in Mark and Yura because it was very risky. And we actually did not get them in through customs and everything until like 1 or 2 days before shooting. So it was a risk. I mean, the producer fought for them. Sean fought for them, but they almost didn't make it in the film. I got to say, like, it was very, very, very close because it was so risky. And we really didn't have like solid backups. I mean, there were some in New York, but they were the real deal from Russia. They were the characters. And yeah, we fought especially hard to get them. And I am so glad that Alex Coco especially put everything on the line to do it, because if it would have failed, it would have been his ass, really. I mean, so that was the whole film too. Like that wasn't just the casting. That was literally every step along the way. Every day we were going to lose a location. Every day we were going to lose an actor. Every day there's COVID scares. There was weather inconsistencies. There was other sort of like craziness happening, just personal problems along the way. I mean, every step of the way, this film felt like it could just fall apart. It was just hanging by a thread. And miraculously, like we pulled it through. And and it is what it is now,
On a not so separate note, looking through the lens, even just unconsciously, do you not judge, but kind of examine whether the person on the other side of the camera fits the character?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, I do. I really do. And, and I try to be on Anora, and honestly on all of the films that had any kind of success, I've been operating. And like I love operating, especially on film. There's nothing like it, you know. You're actually looking through the physical glass and seeing the flicker and hearing the mag, and like there's a true connection to it. And there's also a connection to the actors. So I'm like the first audience in a way, you know, for the film. And, you know, when we finish a take, the actors look at me and they look at the expression on my face because I'm very transparent. There's something I really enjoy about that is like the connection to the actors. And also like, you know, you're shepherding them through this process too, and you're protecting them in a lot of ways. As the operator, as the DP and operator, I'm right there. So if there's craziness happening, it's like right now you see it. Like if I'm having a camera and like there's craziness all around, like I'm the face of what's happening behind the camera. And you have to be really mindful of that. So in being the first audience, and I do try to be like the first judge with the director and the first sort of critic in a way, because, you know, they're looking at, you have to keep in mind, they're usually looking at a really bad video tap, you know, and I'm looking through this pristine, beautiful image. So it's a little bit of both, you know, sometimes they're like, oh, this doesn't look right. But I'm like, no, it's beautiful. Like you have to trust me. It's going to work. And if something is not necessarily working, you know, or if I see like something that feels false, I have to have the courage in a way to talk to the director. And I usually try to do that, of course, privately and let them know like, okay, I think this is not working. Maybe we change this a little bit or whatever it might be. It's just a responsibility, I think, as being the operator, because it's also very tough because when I'm looking through the viewfinder, my eyes are scanning. They're scanning the edges of frame as much as the middle of frame, you know, because I'm looking for my composition. I think operators might understand this, but when you're framing up a shot, sometimes it's easier to look at where the edges of your frame are to know that you've hit your frame. You know what I mean? Like this corner is lining up here, this side is here. And then once you've landed your shot, you're focusing on like the faces more, you know? It's a little bit of both. I mean, sometimes you just want to move with the actors and the edges are not as specific. But with Sean, I think there is a precision to composition that we're both very much after. And he cares a lot about composition and mise en scène and what's in the frame and what's not in the frame. And I mean, we'll spend so much time just, you know, a little bit left, a little bit up, a little bit down, over here. That's all part of the job, you know?
Yeah, and 2 films in, how have you found adjusting to Sean's improvisational approach? Are you at a point where you can not only work with it, but maybe thrive even?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I really like, so this is my favorite approach, and I think Sean really fits into this. And I think, you know, I think Trey, this other director I work with, Trey Shults, fits into this, is like very specific approach, very specific plan. Like we know what the film is, but we don't have a specific rule book necessarily. So like if we want to try a quick zoom in or something and it feels funny and it feels right, we'll just do it. Or a quick pan, or maybe we'll boom up or something, you know, like, I don't know. I try not to have too many rules. But that said, like the film needs to feel consistent. It needs to feel like a whole. But I personally enjoy when films evolve and films change. And like the thing about Anora and the thing about working with Sean, to your point, is that you have to be able to evolve, because whatever film you prepped is not necessarily the film that you're going to make. And you have to be able to roll with the punches, and you have to be able to pivot. And like, for instance, in the film, there's that big sequence. It's like a 28-minute sequence inside the house, you know, the home invasion sort of sequence, which was the hardest part to shoot by far, especially for lighting for me, because you have to maintain consistency. And I actually had to shoot many of the shots at nighttime and light them for daytime, and you would never know it. So it was hard. And, and planning that with the AD and executing that, it was just very, very stressful every single day. And then every morning, Sean would come in with rewrites, because as we were shooting the scene, it needed to evolve. So like the blocking would change, the words would change, the actors were then having to learn their lines, and we were losing shooting time, which we only had a very limited amount of shooting time because it was daylight dependent and it was the winter. So it was very, very challenging. I mean, like just hugely challenging. So like, yeah, I think the more I roll with Sean, the more I shoot with them, the more chaos we can just throw in there. And if something feels too stagnant or too planned, oftentimes I think it's good to change it up or to throw something in there to like just fuck it up a little bit, you know? I think that's my approach with the images too. Like, I don't like them to feel too pristine. I do like them to have a little bit of humanity or a little bit of roughness, a little bit of like handmade quality to them. And, you know, Sean and I, like, we'll disagree on some things, you know, like, for instance, I like to dolly the camera right on the floor, you know, and like have a little bit of like bumps or a little bit of this. And like Sean is usually like very pristine and wants like very perfect. And like, I'm okay with there being dust and dirt on the image, you know, and the grade. And Sean wants to correct all that and make it a bit more pristine. So like, you know, we are kind of a little bit back and forth on some of these things, but he also doesn't hover over me and like make me change things very often at all. We're very much aligned and he has a lot of trust in me at this point. So it's just it's a nice working relationship.
And now that you mentioned the home invasion sequence,
yeah,
which is just so dynamic. And I was going to ask you about it. Then I see a video of you operating the camera while on a skateboard.
Yeah.
However, I still want to get into it to a point. Like, there's that huge fight scene during the home invasion in Ivan's house with Annie, Igor, Garnick, plus Toros on the phone while driving. That goes on for, now you're saying, like 28 minutes. And that whole sequence feels somewhat observational, but at the same time, it's so intense, energetic, and passionate that you could literally cut the tension with a knife. You don't know whether you should laugh or cry, which, by the way, perfectly sums up the movie in its entirety as well. First of all, how do you find the right place for the camera during sequences like this?
Well, that is like the one scene in the film that we actually did plan.
I totally understand.
We planned it as much as you could plan anything on a Sean Baker movie, I would say. I mean, we planned it in the sense that we planned the blocking. I mean, that location was amazing. So like, for me, there were certain directions I wanted to shoot, you know, and like, of course, there was like, the blocking was very specific with like, you know, the relationship to the door where the guys come in, where Yvonne is yelling at her on the couch from the door. And then they move to the other part of the living room. And then, you know, there's that amazing shot of Toros running across the window from one side to the other with holding the red scarf as it's blowing behind him. So we did plan the blocking. I will say it did change quite a bit, especially like for what I just mentioned, that part with Toros coming in. But the goal was for it to always feel dynamic. We wanted to have an evolution to the camera language. For instance, it starts very static, and then we start moving with the characters. There's like some fast dolly moves. There's some quick pans here and there, but we're still very grounded. And then like, even when, you know, he grabs her and puts her on the couch, you know, all that tries to tie her up. It's all very grounded. We shot the whole movie single camera, but we wanted to shoot that in particular, how you would shoot a Hong Kong action film, which is basically you shoot it in editing order. There's no coverage. It's just like shot to shot to shot, how you would edit it. And we didn't really shoot any other shots. I mean, what you see in the film is always shot pretty much. Once they get onto the couch and there's all the negotiating, there's coverage there. But also the camera language changes. We go into handheld, and then it evolves back to sticks at the end. You know, we're more grounded, and then there's like these like dramatic push-ins, you know, like for instance, when he's like negotiating with her and the camera pushes in to him, it becomes a little more subjective at the end. But otherwise, I would say you're right. It starts very objectively, and then it goes into like Hong Kong mode, and then it goes into handheld chaos mode, and then it goes into this more subjective mode at the end. And I think that was like a little bit of a tug of war, a little bit of a push and pull with like me and Sean, because I tend to shoot very subjectively. Like that's my favorite, is like the camera is this person's perspective, or with Mikey. The film is called Anora. Like, let's go be close on her and let's see what she sees. And the camera language can echo her emotional and her psychological state. And it does do that here and there. But ultimately, it is very objective. And I think that's Sean's preference. He likes to let the audience, I think, take their own like subjective interpretations as opposed to the camera telling you how to feel so much. And I really appreciate that. And honestly, I feel like what we've been doing on Red Rocket and on Anora is we've been blending the two. On Anora, I kept like fighting for these moments. I'm like, oh, let's have a moment where we're just with Mikey, like taking in all of the shit that's going on around her. But at the same time, like, you don't really see a lot of that. I mean, there are a couple of breaths where you have like this exhale with her in the middle of all the chaos, but it's not much. They come and then they go very quickly, and I really like that, because it almost like you're kind of you're never relieving the tension that much. You keep it going, and it builds and builds and builds until like, honestly, until that scene of her and Igor. Of course, the scene is about him being called Igor. That scene at the end where she makes fun of his name and calls him a hunchback weirdo, and amongst other words and names. Anyway, so that's like my favorite scene in the movie, and it's like the most still and the most calm, and it's like this beautiful, like, they're watching TV and smoking blunts. It's like, it's such a great scene with just two characters. They've gone through this crazy ordeal together, and now you just have to see them stuck in this room together.
With neither of them want to be there.
I mean, not really, but they also kind of do. Like, there's a beauty to that, like it was just so, I just love it. I love the scene. And it was simple. We knew it was a big, huge moment. I think it might have been the last scene we shot at the house before we moved on to shoot the rest of the movie. We were at the house for many days. I mean, we were there for like over 2 weeks. Yeah, maybe 3 weeks. Anyway, it was, it's just a big release. So, yeah, I mean, the objectivity, the subjectivity, that scene it had to evolve, it had to have a flow to it. It couldn't just be one thing. We kind of made it up as we went, but at the same time, like, here's an example. Me and Sean and Alex Coco, and I think even the AD, we're like, okay, we're going to go to the house. We're going to go to the location. This was during prep. We're going to go to the location and we're going to shot list the big sequence. So at least we have somewhere to start. And we go there for 3 days in a row. And I think we might have shot listed like a page or two out of 30 pages or whatever. So clearly it was just like not going to work, because we had to figure out the blocking first. And the blocking there's so much blocking. There's almost like there's chapters within that scene, So basically we just decided, okay, well, let's just figure out the blocking. Let's know where they're going to be. Let's know how the scene is going to evolve. And then on the day, we'll find the shots. And this location's so good, so beautiful, so easy to shoot, except for the daylight thing I was talking about. I mean, over the course of 2 weeks, we got sunshine, we got rain, we got a little bit of snow. Actually, no, there was no snow. It was a problem, actually. The entire time we were in New York, it was like the driest winter on record or something. So, but we had gray, we had direct sun coming in, we had every single type of like weather and inconsistencies thrown at you. And I had to just sort of maintain this balance, So you had to have your shot selection with that in mind, And Sean wasn't like, he wasn't like, okay, we have to see 360. He was very reasonable. We were very reasonable within the approach. Like, okay, we're going to be this way and we're going to push in this way, or we're going to, we're not be panning all over the place. We do that when Toros comes, but all of that was just naturally lit. So it just had such great light in that location. But yeah, man, it was a challenge, I got to say. And then I had to be the one every single day. Literally every day, I had to be the person to pull the plug and be like, guys, we can't shoot anymore. I'm 2 stops underexposed. I'm already pushing everything a stop just to get a consistency within the image across the day. I knew I was going to have to push in the morning and push in the evening, so I just pushed everything. It was stressful for sure. because every second of daylight we weren't shooting, I was like stressing. I was like, this is I don't know how we're going to make our days if we're just burning light and not shooting it, because we were so dependent on it. And there were only a couple of angles you could really shoot that didn't have daylight. So I probably used every light on the truck, which was not a lot of lights. And anyway, like I remember there's the moment where he goes and puts ice on his head, or he grabs the frozen dumplings and he puts them on his head and he's walking around and pacing. Like that was all shot at night, and basically I just put diffusion on along the entire bank of windows, like 2 or 3 rags of diffusion, and pointed every light we had at the diffusion. Every HMI was hitting it from every angle just to like have a consistent amount of daylight across pushing into that room. It was crazy. And it still was like pushed like a stop or so, maybe even 2 stops. Yeah, it was crazy.
Every single story you tell makes the existence and the quality of the film seem so much just crazier and more beautiful.
Well, I think honestly, that's what sets this film apart, is this film has so much heart, and like,
it's so real.
So real.
No matter how crazy it gets, it's so real.
Yeah, and it feels hard. It feels like one of these impossible films made in the 70s or something, like The French Connection or something, where you're like, man, that film is crazy. Like that was a big inspiration for us, actually, The French Connection. We actually shot, the bridge that Toros is driving underneath. There's the reflection of the bridge and it's flashing. That's literally the same exact strip of bridge that they shot The French Connection in. And it's total homage. And I think the shot is literally stolen from The French Connection, but it's such a cool shot. Anyway, yeah, it was hard. It was challenging. Just like the heart is just oozing out of it, like the heart and soul and like the energy that the crew put into the film. I mean, we had like this young, like indie crew in New York. They loved being there. It was hard, but every day we were making cool stuff. It just felt like something. Everybody felt that energy. And honestly, dude, it was crazy. We had like 20 something crew members, like these kids from New York. Like our like Steadicam operator showed up. Our dolly grip was there. Like all of the PAs were there. I mean, it was like a magical thing, to have everybody travel across the world to Cannes for like this indie film, like people believed in the film when they were making it. And that's really important to me too, like that it doesn't feel like a job, that it feels like you're making art, and that you have people around you that are not just like clocking in and clocking out, people that have ideas to contribute and are passionate, and that passion just oozes off the screen, and from everybody, from the actors, from the camera movements, the lighting. It just has this this rawness to it, that I really, honestly, it's how I like to shoot movies. So, I mean, Anora for me is like exactly my kind of film. It's the kind of films I like to shoot. It's how I like my movies to look and feel. Anora for me is exactly spot on,
So great to hear that. Another thing we must talk about is the strip club, and the idea of a strip club was lighting those scenes where you felt you could have the most creative freedom.
Yeah.
Or was it more about focusing on capturing the true essence of those locations? Or maybe these two can work at the same time.
Yeah. Well, honestly, every scene you keep asking about, I'm like, oh, that was the hardest scene. I think actually the strip club might be the hardest. It was a really hard location. So here's the thing about the strip club is like we had to shoot there 3 weekends, I believe. That means instead of just shooting 6 days in a row, we had to load in, shoot 2 days, load out, load back in, shoot 2 days, load out. So like the load in and load out alone, like killed shoot time and was hard work and was overtime and was like killing the crew, and it was hard. Also, you had to light everything in the strip club. I mean, you can't just show up in there. I mean, sometimes you can if there's a lot of lighting, but this was like a really dark club, and I had to I definitely see like I have some issues with some of the strip club stuff personally on like a cinematographer level, just because it was like really challenging, to shoot like in there on like anamorphic lenses, on zoom lenses and stuff to get the right light levels. But also, one of my favorite shots of all time is in there, like the opening shot of the movie is like iconic. You know what I mean? Like it's one of those images like nobody will ever forget that opening shot. I hope not. I mean, it's special, right? Like right from the beginning of the movie.
We might
And
see
like,
that reference in the future a couple times. I can tell you
oh my
that.
God, dude. And we found that. So basically, like, it's one of those perfect things where like, I don't know, like it wasn't really in this. I don't know if it was in the script that way, but as soon as we found that hallway, because we went there while the club was open,
Hmm.
and we're just wandering around. It's like it's a crazy club. There's like
Taking it in.
it's a lap dance club, so it's not like a real strip club. There's no poles. You know what I'm saying? Like you basically like flirt with the girls. The girls like walk around like what she does in the beginning. She's hustling the guys. She's like flirting. Hey, want to go to ATM? That's what it's like there. It's exactly that. And then she takes them back and gives them a lap dance. And if you want to go a step further, you get a private room upstairs. Like it's exactly what it is. Yeah. So we found that hallway. And dude, I got so excited when we found that hallway because it was happening literally on the scout. It wasn't even a scout. It was just me and the director and the producer. We just went there because we had to go and experience it in person. And that's most of what Sean's prep is, just going to these places and scoping it out and feeling what like the energy is there and what it's like and what the reality of it. So we were there and we walked into that hallway and it wasn't actually lap dances happening. It was kind of weird. Of course, I wanted to be like filming it with my camera, but I kind of just walked down the hallway like as the tracking shot happens in the film. And I was like, dude, I think this hallway is the perfect dimension to fit the camera to track laterally, lap dance to lap dance to lap dance to lap dance. And like literally, okay, so that camera with the zoom lens, I had probably this much space on either side of the camera before because we zoom in at the end of the shot. So that was shot at like a 5.6 at 48 frames a second. So I'm having to like triple or quadruple the amount of light that I would normally use. And we don't have a lot of budget, so I'm using tubes, like Astera tubes above them to get that blue light. And I had to put multiple tubes above each lap dance and like little spotlights and whatnot. I mean, it was crazy. It was so hard. And we had to push that shot 2 stops and shoot it at a 5.6, and I'm just like praying that it comes out. And it came out. It was dark, but it looks so cool. And it's one of my favorite shots of all time. But yeah, the club was very hard, the logistical challenges of it. Also, you wanted to be able to shoot wide and, and show as much of the space and have these huge tracking shots. So I had to build a lot of the lighting in. And fortunately for those days, we were able to get these like mover lights, that like, just moving lights that can like scan across. And I tried to hide them so that they could even be in the shot. So I would like put them on black stands and just have them, I'd have my gaffer. I mean, he was doing it all himself, like the programming and everything, which, was a big job. And we were inspired by what the actual location was as far as the palette and whatnot. We wanted to keep it pretty true to what the place actually looked like and how dark it actually was and how sort of messy it kind of feels too. So I don't know, man. It was really hard. And some of those rooms were crazy. Some of those lap dance rooms, I mean, they were tiny. They're like closets, like you're sticking a camera into a closet with like a wide lens. And it was just really, really freaking challenging.
And the former setting in the house, living room in broad daylight, I mean, according to the film, in front of those huge windows, while the latter, the strip club, in the dark, mainly lit with the aforementioned blue, red, purple, and strip clubs are generally associated with the nightlife. This contrast, of course, works magic, yet still those scenes need to connect, or these aspects of the film. How do you tether something like this? What were your talks like with Sean in this matter?
I mean, I feel like there's a lot of things that help tie it all together. I'd say it's just our approach to the filmmaking, the camera language, the perspective, that sort of objectivity versus subjectivity. I'd say we're pretty objective a lot of times in the strip club, but then there's the opening shot. Okay, the opening shot maybe is a perfect example. It starts objectively, tracking, in this like very objective way, just showing you dance, dance, dance. And then when we land on Annie, we zoom all the way into like a tight close up of her and she's bobbing in and out of frame and it's like dreamlike and seductive and like euphoric, you know? And I feel like that's like a good sort of metaphor for the film almost, like it's a combination of the two. And yeah, I mean, I think the lenses also help, I mean, we shot with these vintage like Lomo Russian lenses, and like they give it a certain texture and certain milkiness, but also like it doesn't have to like all blend together and look the same either, like each place just had to feel honest and feel right. And there's also a dichotomy with the two. For instance, right from the beginning, you go from the club to the train to her bedroom, and it's like, I don't know, like I think showing the huge difference in scenario and mise en scène and sort of like, the realm where she has all this power and then the realm where she's just a normal person is like, it's interesting. And I think it needs to feel different. And also it helps drive in the fact, like when she does go to Yvonne's mansion and it's just flooded with daylight and it's brighter and it feels rich, when you're in his bedroom and it's just like bright and like bright walls that are made of leather. The walls are actually made of leather, which is insane. And this bright red bed with huge view of like the bay and whatnot outside. I mean, it should feel different than her bedroom. It should feel different than the club, So like, I think it just helps drive in that dichotomy between the two and honestly just tells the story even a little bit better.
Maybe I'm circling back to camera placements. Nevertheless, the final scene in the car, we slow down.
Yeah.
And then there is this change in the film's understanding of intimacy as well. When shooting in such a confined space, which can be infinitely uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
What needs to be done to make it work, especially considering we are talking about the ending, literally?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, here's the thing with that scene. Again, okay, so now that was probably the hardest scene in the movie. I tell you, each time you ask me, I'd be like, "Oh, that's the hardest scene." Actually, this one might have been the hardest. I think we shot the scene over 3 different days. So the first day, we're on this sidewalk in Brighton Beach. I mean, it's a main road. It's when he drops her off, right? And we shot the wide shot with all the snow. We shot him going up the stairs, looking back at her, and then maybe like 1 or 2 other angles. And then Sean was like, I don't want to shoot the inside of the scene. It's too crazy. The scene is too intimate. I don't want to be rushed. We're not shooting it today. Like, okay. So we kick it to another day or maybe the next day. So then the next day we're shooting the other part inside before the ending, before the sex part of the scene. There's a moment between them and we shot that. There's a moment where they look right into the lens. We shot those moments. And then the next day, he's like, okay, I don't want to shoot the sex part. The sex scene is too intimate. I don't want pedestrians walking by. I don't want cars going by. So we had to get to another location, which I wasn't able to scout. So then we show up to this other location. This is now the 3rd day. They're on ladders shooting snow into the frame. It's like crazy. And we're on like live streets with people going by. We have PAs blocking traffic. I mean, it was insanity. And then we'd get these moments where everything was perfect and then everything would fall apart. Then the 3rd day, we moved to a different location. And by this point, we're like, okay, I think we can get away with it because buildings outside are a similar color and there's a lot of snow on the windows at this point in the scene. So we get to this next part of the scene. And then this is the part where, she climbs on top of him. And basically it's that one shot. We start wide and then I think we push in and then I think we push in further. It's also like one of the only moments the camera really does like deliberate push in. I can only think of like very few moments in the film that happened. And it's very intimate. I mean, so like what you're asking about, I mean, that was the hardest part is you're shooting an indie film in New York on live streets. it was like not really working in our favor in that moment. So then this is what happens. So we're shooting, we have it framed up, we're blocking it, everything is right. And then the sun comes around the building and it's full sun. And I'm like, dude, there's nothing I can do to block the sun. It's lighting up the car. It'll never match. So what we have to do is go shoot another scene and then come back in the afternoon when the sun goes behind that building and it's cloudy again. It's shaded. And I'm like, okay, this is perfect. This matches. But it really screwed with our actors because, they were ready to shoot it. And then the sun comes out. And I'm like, I felt terrible. And, I hadn't scouted it because it was a audible that we pulled last minute. And then we had to throw another audible. They had to go shoot another scene and then they had to come back. And by that time we came back, the cops were saying that our permit was up and we had to leave. We weren't allowed to shoot. And it basically was pure chaos. The producers fixed it, or the locations department fixed it, argued with the cops, whatever we had to do, paid them off. Who knows? We were able to shoot the scene. And I mean, it was an intimate, difficult scene. I mean, Sean was in the car, in the back seat. When the seat goes down, that was literally Sean pulling like a lever. I mean, dude, Sean was in the car. And I mean, it's one of those scenes. It's like, did we get it? Do we know if we got it? We don't even know if we got it. But like, I think we got it. It wasn't until we watched the dailies, like a couple days later, we were like, okay, I think we're good. I think we don't have to reshoot it. It was so difficult, so chaotic. The actors were so like patient and they gave everything. And, I mean, in one of those moments, all you want to do is create like an environment for them where they can do it, where they feel like they have the space and the intimacy and it was really hard because of that. I think that's where like the size of our movie became like a real challenge. Because otherwise you just block the street off and close the set and, all the things that you can do on a bigger movie where you can like really control it. And it was a real difficult thing. And I'm so glad the actors are professional enough that they can like block out all that chaos and just get in the moment, and they nailed it. And yeah, it was hard. It was a very, very hard scene and very stressful.
But thanks to this, the payoff is even bigger, right?
Yeah, I mean, and you're right. It's quiet, it's intimate, it slows down the film. So like maintaining that intimacy became the hardest part because like for that moment of the film where it's like the quietest and the most intimate, it was like the most chaotic behind the camera. So like, I mean, you would never know it, of course, watching it, but it was one of those like challenges that doesn't really necessarily show up on screen, but man, it was freaking hard. And, me being the DP and like I had to nail it. Everyone had to nail it, but it wasn't even up to us. Sometimes like just, someone's in the background trying to go to their house, and like some Brighton Beach local or some like grandma or someone with shopping carts and stuff. And Sean wanted nobody else in the scene. He wanted it to be perfectly like static, no background, no nothing, and just quiet, which is right for the scene, right? And it's one of those things where everybody is like, Sean, no, we can't. That's too much. That's crazy. It's too hard to do that. But, Sean was right. Usually his requests make it very difficult. Usually his requests seem crazy, seem over the top. But he's usually right. He's the director. He does know best. And I think we've learned to trust Sean, even though like it could be like neurotic or it could seem like over the top or just unreasonable or whatever. But I mean, it's like, would you say that to like Wes Anderson, like going on set and like arranging every little thing so it's perfect? Like, no, it's like they're the director. Everything matters. And sometimes for me, like I get caught up, like, making the day. And I have to remind myself, like, no, it's the director's film. They're putting everything on the line. Something must be telling them to do it this way. So we're doing it this way.
And to wrap up with a simple yet sometimes uncomfortable topic, what can you tell us about any upcoming projects, ventures, or plans for the future in general?
Let's see. I mean, I'm actually not currently shooting any films. So I don't really have any current projects for the future right now. So I want to see where Anora goes. I want to just keep doing some commercials, and I have 3 daughters. So I'm trying to spend time at home when I can as much as possible. And I really want to work again with Sean. or with Trey Schultz, or with these directors that I truly, truly respect and will like go to war with and put everything on the line for and take chances. I want to take on films that scare me as well. Like Anora was scary. Shooting a 35 millimeter anamorphic movie, low budget in New York was like, it was scary. We didn't have the budget to light it the way that you would normally light a movie of that caliber. But I love those challenges. And I just want to keep working with directors that challenge me and scripts that scare me, things like that.
Well, one thing is for sure, I'm going to be watching. Thank you so much for your time, first and foremost, especially on a Sunday morning.
Oh, of course.
And all these mad, amazing insights.
Cool.
Absolutely love talking to you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.